A very warm welcome. You're watching CNN News 18 Global. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, the United Nations has taken a vote demanding a humanitarian ceasefire in the war-torn region of Gaza. In an emergency special session, a majority of 153 nations voted in favor of the ceasefire. Ambassadors and other diplomats burst into applause at the vote count, which showed much higher support than that of the resolution that was passed on October 27th. 10 nations voted against the resolution, while 23 remained abstained. The vote calls for a ceasefire and for all parties to comply with international law and for humanitarian access to hostages, including their immediate release as well. While a General Assembly vote is politically significant, it is non-binding, which means the UN cannot make it into a law or a substantive rule. A similar vote was taken on 27th of October. Although the resolution drafted by Arab states was not binding, it did carry political weight. On that note, let me also break down for you what the UNGA has now voted for. It's important to highlight the fact that they voted for the ceasefire and that majority of votes have been in favor.
The United Nations on Tuesday voted to back a resolution that demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, coming as US President Joe Biden warned that Israel was losing international support in light of Palestinian civilian casualties.
In the name of humanity, I ask you all once again, stop this violence now.
After dire warnings by UN officials about a growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, more than three-quarters of the 193-member UN General Assembly backed the resolution. The US and Israel voted against the measure, along with 8 other countries.
Ceasefire means one thing and one thing only: ensuring the survival of Hamas.
The resolution is not binding, but it carries political weight, reflecting a global view on the war. A similar vote was held in the 15-member UN Security Council last week and vetoed by the United States. The Palestinian Authority welcomed the resolution and urged countries to pressure Israel to adopt the ceasefire, as fighting between Israel and Hamas intensified across Gaza on Tuesday. Residents said Israeli shelling in the south was some of the heaviest in days, despite its forces earlier ordering people to flee there for safety. There are growing signs Israel is becoming diplomatically isolated over its conduct of war. Biden told a campaign donor event earlier on Tuesday that most of the world still backs Israel, but that it was, quote, starting to lose that support by indiscriminate bombing. Biden's comments came as close ally Australia backed the UN ceasefire resolution in a rare split with the United States. A joint statement with Canada and New Zealand said, quote, the price of defeating Hamas cannot be the continuous suffering of all Palestinian civilians. Though they also added that a ceasefire cannot be one-sided and demanded Hamas stop using Gaza's residents as human shields.
The time has come to put the blame where it belongs, on the shoulders of the Hamas monsters. But this resolution does not even condemn Hamas. It doesn't even mention Hamas. I honestly don't know how can someone look in the mirror and support a resolution that doesn't condemn Hamas and doesn't even mention Hamas by name. So at the very last, I urge you to vote for adding a condemnation of Hamas to the resolution. But you know what? I have an idea. If you want a real ceasefire, here is the right address. This is the phone number of Hamas's office in Gaza. You can all call +970-599-3765 and ask for Yihya Sinwar. Tell Hamas to put down their arms, turn themselves in, and return our hostages. This will bring a complete ceasefire that will last forever.
But what does this latest UNGA resolution go on to indicate as far as Israel's own global standing and international support is concerned? How is the relationship currently between Washington and Tel Aviv? Let me break it down for you. All is not well with US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. The US President has given a stark warning to the Israeli Prime Minister, saying that Israel will lose its global support, this due to its own indiscriminate bombing in the Gaza Strip. Although Biden has refrained from publicly pressurizing his ally, the US President has also given a harsh warning this time. And when was this? This was at a Hanukkah reception that was hosted by the President himself at the White House on Monday. And also speaking at this political fundraiser, President Joe Biden described Netanyahu's coalition as the most conservative government in Israel's history that does not want a two-state solution. Though US is a strong supporter of Israel, Biden has called on Netanyahu to make changes in his hard right governance. Also, do not forget, it's costing US President Joe Biden his own popularity domestically also. US, as we all know, is headed into the presidential election in the year 2024. Now, the question that arises is, will Netanyahu turn a deaf ear to his friend's comments? So why has this UNGA resolution received such an overwhelming number of votes? Let me break down these figures for you. The UN has voted, it's important to highlight that there's been a demand for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. This, of course, as we know, is going to be a second demand for a ceasefire, one that has already taken place. 153 nations voted in favor. That included India and the Middle East. Remember, earlier resolution, India had abstained, and this time, in fact, India has chosen to support the resolution calling for a ceasefire. It's called for international law to be followed. 10 nations at the same time voted against, including Israel and the United States. Both these nations do not want any kind of ceasefire taking place because, remember, now Israel has sort of changed its strategy as far as the war in Gaza is concerned. They say that they are standing at a very crucial juncture as far as this war is concerned, and any kind of operational pause will sort of cost them mighty. At the same time, 23 nations abstained. That included the UK, Ukraine, and some EU nations. What's also being discussed in media at the same time is the fact that European nations this time have sort of withdrawn their support. On 27th of October, 120 had voted in favor, 14 against, and 45 had abstained. So you can clearly see that 120 had voted in favor of the resolution back on 27th of October, whereas this time the number has increased. Those who've supported the resolution this time, it's 153, which goes on to indicate that there's been an increase in 33 votes that have supported the resolution. On that note, let me also bring in my guest today. I'm joined in by Dr. Israel Beaumont, who's a senior researcher, and joining me live from Israel. He's a senior researcher at the Institute of International Relations in Prague. Many thanks to you, Dr. Israel, for joining in. Now, the United Nations has voted demanding this humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. We've seen there's been an increase in the number of votes compared to the resolution last time. There's been an increase of 33 votes to be precise. How do you assess this vote?
Well, I think the international opinion, global opinion, is gradually shifting from Israel because the numbers who've been killed in Israel's war against Hamas, and it was inevitable that the longer the war goes on, the more Israel has a problem in terms of international opinion because of the large number of civilian casualties.
All right, Doctor, majority nations have voted in favor of a ceasefire. What happens next in regards to the ongoing conflict? We know that these resolutions are legally non-binding. They are, of course, as you also highlighted, a reflection of the larger global sentiment. But what happens now?
Well, Israel, I think the United States is a key factor here. And the United States is still supporting Israel. It recognizes that Hamas must be weakened, significantly weakened, ideally eliminated militarily. But I think that would be very, it doesn't look, Israel's ability to eliminate Hamas as a military entity, it's questionable. But certainly, Israel has weakened, certainly in terms of Hamas, its power and its rule in the northern Gaza has certainly been, Hamas has been dealt a blow. Hamas
Dr.
still
Berman,
has.
why do you doubt Israel's ability to wipe out Hamas?
The problem is that Hamas, they still have. It's very difficult for Israel to fight this war because of the nature of the fighting is in heavily populated areas, which would require Israel. It'd be very, very difficult for Israel to fight Hamas without significantly increasing the number of non-combatants who are killed. Also, you have there is this significant threat to the hostages, Israel's hostages that remain in Gaza. There are still some 135 hostages there. There is a ticking clock. The United States is supporting Israel, but United States has only limited patience. At the end of the day, we are talking about weeks, not months. The Biden administration has made it clear to Israel's government that it cannot fight this war for months on end.
Right. Right, there is certainly US pressure, and that seems to be growing, something that I'm also going to be touching upon now. But before that, I want to also discuss those countries that chose to abstain. 23 nations decided not to vote, and among them have been UK, Ukraine, even some European nations who had chosen to vote in favor of Israel last time, in fact. How do you think what do you make of the changing position now with regards to the ceasefire?
Well, again, these countries such as the UK and other European countries, I think right now, for example, UK, which you mentioned, the Netherlands, I think, is another European country which abstained. They, for now, are supporting Israel, but the problem is that there needs to be an end game. Israel has to spell out what will happen the day after the war, and this is one of the key problems. Israel is not spelling out, is not making it clear what will happen the day after, and this is partly because Netanyahu is a hostage to the most extreme. He has the most very extreme people in his government. He's frightened that if he, for example, allows the Palestinian Authority to play a role in Gaza, he could lose the support of his coalition partners.
Fair enough. Now, let's also talk about the United States and Israel. It's been a tricky diplomatic tightrope walking for both the countries, especially for US President, who, of course, has backed Israel as an ally, even voted against a ceasefire as far as US's vote is concerned. There still seems to be some kind of friction between Prime Minister Netanyahu and the US President Joe Biden. Biden strongly criticized the Israeli Prime Minister's governance and said he would lose global support if he continues indiscriminate bombarding of Gaza. If this kind of tension keeps growing, do you think that Joe Biden will take a U-turn and stop supporting Israel?
Biden has been President Biden has been the support he has shown for Israel has been unprecedented. He has gone bent over backwards to help Israel. Also, you look also at the munitions he has approved for Israel. The military political support has been phenomenal. But the problem is, President Biden has got a lot of criticism from his Democratic camp.
Right.
A lot of people are very unhappy with what he's doing. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is playing a very dangerous game because he's playing politics. He sees value in he sees value in disagreements with Joe Biden. He thinks that can help him in a future election campaign. He can help him with his right-wing base. But that is just idiocy, because he is risking, as you say, the friction is growing. He is risking confrontation with Israel's most powerful ally and its most important ally. And he has, at the end of the day, part of the reason why he doesn't want, he has been against any idea of any two-state solution, which is something the United States wants to. At the end of the day, he wants Gaza and the West Bank to be part of one Palestinian entity, with the eventual prospect of a two-state solution. Maybe not realistic right now, but certainly something for the future. And Netanyahu is standing in the way of this. And this will lose Israel a lot of support, and it could dangerously damage relations with the United States.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's why I want to ask from you, can Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel, in fact, afford to jeopardize the only largest supporter of Israel at the moment, and that is the United States? Do you think that President Joe Biden's criticism will have any kind of impact on Prime Minister Netanyahu? Because I think, so far in this war, the most strongly worded criticism from the United States has arrived only during the Hanukkah reception on Monday, when the US president actually sent out a very strong word of caution to Israel that global support is going to start diminishing very rapidly as far as is just because of Israel's indiscriminate bombing of Gaza is concerned.
Well, it's worth pointing out one thing. Biden has actually, the United States pressure has actually had an impact on Israel. For example, particularly humanitarian aid. Israel has allowed in, for example, fuel, something which she was against allowing in at the beginning of the conflict. This was because of, largely, I would say, because of US pressure. So this is having an impact. But at the same time, I worry about the mindset of Netanyahu, who is so obsessed with his long-term political survival that he's ready to damage relations with the United States if he feels that will help his political interests. So this is a big worry as well.
That remains a worry indeed. My last question, Dr. Berman, I want to ask from you, as far as the two-state solution, something that you were talking about, how pertinent is going to be the contribution, or rather the inclusion of, say, moderate Arab states like Saudi Arabia or the UAE in building of that two-state solution for Israel? Do you think that Israel could also garner more support if it involves these Arab nations and sort of come up with a greater alliance that includes Arab nations along with Israel, the United States, even NATO?
Well, it's an interesting point, because United Arab Emirates, actually, I think there was an interview with the Wall Street Journal, pointed out that they want to be part of reconstruction efforts in Gaza.
Yes.
But this would have to be something that the long-term solution would have to be a two-state solution. So the UAE pointed out that they would like to team up with other moderate Arab states, which would eventually, with reconstruction, but only with the proviso that this leads to a long-term solution. So this was actually an opportunity for Israel. This is certainly, and this would be a way of showing that Abraham Accords could bring benefits both for Israel and the Palestinians if this can bring about a political solution. So I think this is something which has potential, but not if Netanyahu and his coalition partners obviously block any suggestion of a two-state solution. And certainly Netanyahu, this government is very much set against any prospect of a two-state solution.
All right, Dr. Berman, we'll have to leave it at that. Many thanks to you for joining in on CNN News 18 Global with your precious inputs. Thoroughly appreciate.